I find myself in a troubling situation and, to be honest, I'm at a loss about how to proceed. Let me take you back to the start. Half a decade ago, our next-door neighbor, whom we affectionately call Fred, though his real name is Charlie, shared the devastating news of his 14-year-old son's disappearance. The incident was reported to the authorities, broadcasted on the news, and was the talk of the town. My wife and I were deeply affected and offered our assistance in any way possible. As the years rolled by without any news of their son, we assumed they had accepted the grim reality. My wife and I never had the courage to ask if they ever found the body. Occasionally, Fred and his wife would invite us over for a barbecue during the summer. We couldn't help but notice that both had changed since their son's disappearance. Fred's wife, Kathy, had become more reserved, and Fred seemed more anxious and uneasy, which was understandable. Fast forward a few years to just last week. Fred approached me while I was taking out the trash and asked to borrow a shovel. Without a second thought, I handed him my best shovel, not questioning his need for it. He thanked me, mentioned some work in his backyard, and promised to return it the next day before disappearing into his yard. From an upstairs window that overlooks Fred's backyard, I noticed him struggling to dig a large hole. Considering his age, 56, I thought of lending him a hand with my second shovel. However, as I entered his backyard and called out his name, he abruptly dropped my shovel and rushed over to me, insisting that he didn't need help. His strange reaction prompted me to ask what was wrong, but he sternly told me not to use the shovel in his backyard and gestured towards the gate. His behavior was so off-putting that I left without another word. From my upstairs window, I continued to watch him dig for another half hour. Once he was done, he started looking around, seemingly checking if anyone was watching. He spotted me at my window, and all I could do was casually walk away. I had a hunch he was up to something and wanted to find out what it was. I kept an eye on his backyard, but he stopped digging. I assumed he knew I was watching and would resume his work under the cover of darkness. My assumption proved correct when I heard the sound of a shovel hitting the dirt at 1:30 in the morning. It was too dark to see anything from my window, so I quietly went outside and peered over the fence. I saw him digging clearly. When he went inside his house, I seized the opportunity to sneak into his backyard and inspect the hole. The moonlight revealed a small piece of a black garbage bag sticking out from the dirt at the bottom of the hole. The next day, I noticed that the hole in Fred's backyard was completely filled, and his SUV was parked on the street instead of his driveway. I don't know what transpired the rest of that night, but I can't shake off the disturbing thought that the object in the hole might have been his son's body. For all I know, he might have dug up the hole to remove whatever he had previously buried there and disposed of it elsewhere. This is all speculation, and you might think I'm crazy. I haven't told anyone, not even my wife, and frankly, I don't know what to do. Fred never returned my shovel, and I'm not going to ask for it. In fact, he's been avoiding me ever since. Something unsettling happened yesterday. By chance, I looked out my window across to Fred's house and saw him standing at one of his windows, staring into mine. When he saw me, he quickly shut his blinds. This happened in broad daylight. I have no idea what to do, but I'm genuinely terrified. Throughout my life, I've resided in 3 different homes. The first 2 were with my family, and the current one is where I live alone. This unnerving incident took place in my first home when I was 15, just a few months before my family moved out. We were never particularly close with our neighbors, despite them having 2 boys, Charles and Johnny, who were around the same age as my younger brother and me. One day, while my brother and I were playing basketball in our driveway, Johnny approached us. He asked if the rumors of us moving were true. After a brief conversation, he invited us to join him and his brother the next day to shoot BB guns by the river in the nearby woods. I agreed, seeing no harm in it, and my brother, not wanting to be left out, asked if he could join as well. The following day, just before dusk, Charles and Johnny arrived at our doorstep. We quickly answered the door, not wanting our parents to find out about our BB gun adventure. As we walked down the sidewalk, I couldn't help but find their seriousness about this activity, evident in their camouflage attire and duffel bag full of guns, a bit odd. Once we reached the woods, Johnny unzipped the bag and handed my brother and me what I assumed were BB guns. However, to our shock, Johnny revealed that they were real firearms. Charles then began firing at trees across the river. I was a mix of angry and confused. I took the gun from my brother's hands and put both firearms back into the bag, telling them we were uncomfortable and needed to leave. They seemed half angry as we walked away, and one of them even cursed at us. That night at dinner, we told our parents that the boys were strange, but we didn't mention the gun incident. Later that night, I woke up to a cold breeze and a hard object pressed against the back of my head. It was Johnny, who had somehow entered my room. He threatened me, saying that if I told anyone about the guns, he would harm my family and me. I agreed to his terms out of fear. For the following months, I would often see either Johnny or Charles peering into our rooms from their house. Their behavior became increasingly bizarre as our moving date approached. A week before we moved, a rock was thrown at my window late at night. I saw a figure pointing a pistol at my window, causing me to drop to the ground in fear, only to hear laughter from the boys outside. They continued to harass us until we finally moved. Neither my brother nor I ever told anyone about the threats or the boys' strange behavior. All I know is that those boys were troubled, and it was a relief when we finally moved away. 2 weeks ago, I found myself in a situation that still haunts me. Fresh out of college and living alone, I had to settle for a house in a less than ideal neighborhood due to financial constraints. The neighbors on either side of me were a constant source of irritation. On one side, I had neighbors who seemed to have an insatiable love for loud music. On the other side, I had two women who were, quite frankly, the most unsettling individuals I've ever encountered. One of the women appeared to be in her 60s, unfriendly and seemingly detached from reality. The other, a slightly younger woman, suffered from severe mental disabilities. Their relationship was unclear to me. Often I would be sitting on my porch, only to witness the older woman restraining the younger one during her frequent and intense outbursts. She would cross her arms, rock back and forth, and scream, sometimes even pointing at me and mumbling to the older woman. It was a disturbing spectacle that often drove me back inside my house. One particular night, their commotion was unusually loud. The younger woman was having an intense episode, and the older woman seemed to be struggling to control her. After enduring this for an hour, I decided to confront them. I knocked on their door, only to be met with a hostile, "What the hell do you want?" from the older woman. I politely asked them to keep the noise down. The younger woman then entered the room, repeatedly screaming, "How dare you!" The older woman quickly shut the door in my face, leaving me standing there, baffled. Returning to my bed, I noticed that the noise had finally ceased. I managed to fall asleep, only to be awakened at 3 a.m. by a strange noise downstairs. I dismissed it as a figment of my imagination and went back to sleep. However, I was jolted awake again 20 minutes later. This time, I could clearly hear a noise in my room. In the dim light of my phone, I saw a shadowy figure at the foot of my bed. To my horror, it was the face of the mentally disturbed woman from next door. She screamed, and I screamed back, stumbling towards the door in a panic. I managed to lock the door behind me and called the police. When the police arrived, the older woman pleaded with them to let the younger woman go. However, they insisted on taking her in for the night. One of the officers asked if I wanted to press charges. As he asked this, the older woman glared at me with such hatred that I decided not to press charges. She continued to glare at me as she walked back to her house, and a few minutes later, I saw her drive away. Despite this incident, both women still live next door. The older woman's animosity towards me is palpable, and the younger woman's unpredictable behavior is a constant source of fear. I am seriously considering moving out, as their presence has made living here a terrifying experience.